Hello and welcome back to Star Wars Forever. And this will be my thoughts, my spoiler-filled thoughts on Obi-Wan Kenobi, parts 1, 2, and 3. So we're halfway through the show. I was going to say the season, and there's been rumors already of a season 2, which I'm like, I don't know. I'm not sure about that one. Which isn't to say I don't like the show, but like I'm not sure how much story they can wring out of this character at this point in time. But that being said, Obi-Wan Kenobi, number one, not a fan of the title. Like, just a bit of imagination, please. I mean, like, the Book of Boba Fett. I like that. It works. It clicks. It's not just called Boba Fett, you know. And I'm not like what do you call it, the trials and tribulations of Obi-Wan Kenobi. I don't know, but like, there's got to be something, you know. Like for me, part of the fun of Star Wars is like the titles, the Rise of Skywalker, you know, Attack of the Clones, like. I like that fun kind of, you know, old time movie serial stuff. But, you know, it is what it is. So, Obi-Wan Kenobi, season 1 of 1, maybe, we don't know. The first 2 parts dropped. And I like how in this, because the only thing we've had to go on with live action Star Wars has been The Mandalorian season 1 and 2 and The Book of Boba Fett. And all 3 feel like the same, you know, very specific tapestry. They have the same kind of font for like the episode title, and then they're done in chapters. The end credits with the concept art is identical. Like there's a very specific thematic tone and kind of presentation of those episodes and those shows. Obi-Wan Kenobi feels a bit more like the movies. It has kind of the traditional Starfield blue font end credits, and it kind of is just called Part 1, Part 2, Part 3. So it feels a bit more like a prestige kind of thing. And it does by the nature of the fact that we have so many, well, not so many, but a fair few characters who are like big characters in the Star Wars world, and in some cases being portrayed by people who played them in previous movies. So obviously we had Ewan McGregor back, and the story follows him 10 years after Revenge of the Sith as he's struggling in the desert of Tatooine. He's isolated. He's kind of, you know, still working through his trauma 10 years on. He's still kind of dreaming about what happened to Anakin and is still calling out to his master, Qui-Gon Jinn. Now, we were left with that little carrot at the end of Revenge of the Sith when Yoda's like, I found a way to speak to an old friend and I will teach you how to do this. Clearly, he didn't do a very good job because Obi-Wan is still unable to kind of call out to Qui-Gon. And I would probably bet, you know, my house that we're going to see Liam Neeson at the end of the show. I mean, they've referenced it far too many times in these first 3 episodes. You know, Obi-Wan is constantly kind of like, I don't know about this, Master. It's like he's holding this, you know, this unattainable image of Qui-Gon over his own shoulder and kind of speaking to almost out of comfort at times, you think, you know, but there's no way they're not going to pay that off. There's no way. And the show opens with a very lengthy kind of recap of the prequels, and specifically Obi-Wan and Anakin's journey together, the creation of Darth Vader, and where they left things off. It was a weird montage, like very well made, but it felt like a fan cut to me because the music was not Star Wars music. I don't know if it was stuff that Natalie Holt, who does the score for this show, composed, but it felt like one of those really good fan edits that you see on YouTube of like people putting together specific storylines and kind of making a nice montage out of it, and they just use like, you know, not Star Wars music. So immediately I kind of was in the mind of like a fan film kind of thing, you know. But we get into it and we see Obi-Wan out in the desert. He's kind of working away. He's keeping to himself, but he's looking on Luke from afar, and you see the homestead and you see where he lives in this cave, which is not where we see him in Star Wars. So obviously this is, I mean, again, it's the kind of midpoint. I've said this since the first images came out. I really wish they'd aged up Ewan McGregor, or at least done the hair a little bit differently and kind of given him a bit more, not like full grey, but like greying a bit more than they put like a few dashes in there, but I feel like maybe they could have leaned into it a bit more, because I feel like they perfectly transitioned him between episode 1, 2, and 3. And I don't feel like there's that much of a difference here. Now, Ewan McGregor is perfectly age appropriate now for Obi-Wan Kenobi in terms of like where he is in the story. But just because Ewan McGregor has aged really well, I think they should have just done something a little bit, just touched it up a little bit more in it to kind of line up with Alec Guinness because we're like literally only about 7 or 8 years away from that. And there's been a lot of people online kind of defending it and saying, here's Alec Guinness from 1966, and he's wearing a wig, I think. But, you know, you can say, oh, yeah, fair enough, it's permissible, but that was one thing for me. I felt like they could have done a little bit better. And I'll just throw it out there, and then again, spoilers and stuff, but my main gripe for this whole show so far is the accent, Ewan's accent. And I even read an interview where he said that he was getting ready to do the show and he felt like, shit, I haven't got the voice. And so he had to work with people and kind of speak to people and really, really work on that voice. And I'm I hate to say I'm not feeling the work, but there are times where he feels a bit like a really good Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan Kenobi impersonator. Like he's doing an impression of himself. There are times where he really taps into Alec Guinness in a really interesting way that feels more Alec Guinness than he's done before in terms of the voice, which is really cool. And then there are times where I just hear his kind of generic Ewan McGregor American accent kind of peek through. And it must be difficult when it's your job and you have a lot of different voices that you use. And obviously with Ewan McGregor, he's rarely acting in his own accent, you know, and so I can see how it's probably tricky. But for me, it throws me off every now and then when he sounds different from scene to scene. Whereas Joel Edgerton coming back playing Uncle Owen, brilliant. Phenomenal. Like when Obi-Wan is looking out to the homestead and you hear Owen going, Luke, like it's like the tone is the exact fucking same as Star Wars. It's brilliant. I almost feel like they took that from A New Hope. But you know, when he speaks to Obi-Wan and is like, you know, stay away from Luke and stuff, and he's the perfect curmudgeon. First of all, like written perfectly, it just feels exactly like that same character we saw in the first Star Wars film. But the voice, he's done the voice where it feels like Uncle Owen, but just, you know, obviously age appropriate. Joel Edgerton absolutely destroyed it. Like, phenomenal. Like, he made that connective thread, like, perfect. Like, absolutely perfect. And I hate to take anything away from Ewan McGregor. I will say that what Ewan has done successfully is just the performance. And you can argue that an accent is part of a performance, but I think that the emotions that he's conveying are phenomenal. He's a great actor. And the wildest shit that you will ever even think of when it comes to the Star Wars fandom is that literally, and it works both ways, but, you know, in the first episode, you literally see Obi-Wan saying, like, to this kind of young Jedi that, like, you know, the Jedi are dead, or, like, you know, the Jedi are gone, or something to that effect. And it is very, very literally a one-to-one analog between Obi-Wan at this point in time and Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi. It's time for the Jedi to end. The Jedi are dead. The fight, we lost the fight, you know. It's done. You know, forget it. Go bury your lightsaber in the sand and forget about it. And, you know, all the things that people hated about Luke in The Last Jedi saying was so out of character. And now people are like, oh, this is great. It's like Star Wars meets Logan. Like, I love the emotional trauma that he's gone through and how, like, you know, people just like buying into it, and as they should, because it's good storytelling. But, you know, this notion of like, oh, this is so great to see this Jedi in exile. It's like, yeah, that's the point. You know, it's like poetry, it rhymes. Hopefully it'll work. That kind of, yeah, the whole George thing where, like, it's like it kind of echoes itself. It's like a, you know, a continuous circle of storytelling. And, you know, that was there just from seeing the first Star Wars film. It was clear that Obi-Wan was exiled, and you know, by choice, obviously, but, like, you know, he was there and the Jedi were gone. And that's one thing, and again, another double-edged. Well, actually, I'll finish off that previous thought. So there are also people who are saying, oh, they made Obi-Wan pathetic. Oh, they've made him woke, or whatever the fuck they say. Like, oh, Kathleen Kennedy had to get all her hands over this, didn't she? Like, I even read someone literally say this, and I'm not kidding you. They said, I can't believe that they made Obi-Wan this hermit in the desert. This sounds like a theme that Kathleen Kennedy dreamed up. Why is she still being allowed near these projects? And it's like, that was literally the way he was written in the very first fucking movie. Just hello, anyone home? Honestly, it's ridiculous. Now, the two sides thing. Well, okay, so for me, telling this story is interesting, and I'm enjoying seeing it, but I kind of just prefer the idea that Obi-Wan was there and did nothing for 20 years, So it's kind of it's a double-edged sword for me, hugely, because I am really enjoying seeing it, but I kind of prefer not to at the same time. It's a bit of a tricky one, but also specifically to the idea of like the Jedi and how many Jedi are out there. Now, obviously, it's a galaxy, right? But for me, the tone is very clear in Star Wars. It's like the Jedi are gone. Even Obi-Wan, he's not really a Jedi anymore. Like he's stepped away from everything. And Yoda is there, but like it feels like Obi-Wan and Yoda are like the only two like like former Jedi that exist, and like Luke, the Return of the Jedi. Luke is like the last hope, and the more that we see, and the more that they continue to focus on this time period, and the time period of the Skywalker saga as a whole, the more that they do stuff with this new era. We're just seeing more and more like Ahsoka. Ahsoka's around, okay, and then so and so's, and then the characters from Rebels are around, and suddenly it's like this period between Revenge of the Sith and Star Wars is no longer this gulf of no Jedi. It's like there's dozens of them around, and they've all got these backstories, and there's like Anakin's apprentice, and like these Inquisitors, and then all these Force sensitive characters, and that just you didn't feel that they were there before, and of course, that needs to happen if you want to tell these new stories. But I am desperate for like just something separate, like give us something 100 years before or after, because, and this is me criticizing the Obi-Wan show. I feel like that they can't take their foot out of the pool that is all these established characters and locations. I mean, we haven't had a Star Wars live action show now without Tatooine being featured. And I'm it's going to be my bingo card for Andor, which is the next show coming out. Will they go to Tatooine at some point? And I'll almost be disappointed if they don't, but I'll have a lot of respect for them if they don't also, because it's like Tatooine was described at the beginning of this whole Star Wars extravaganza as like, if what did Luke say exactly? If there's a bright center of the universe, you're on the planet that it's farthest from. And the way that this world has expanded in the past like 10 years has been like Tatooine is the place to be. Everything revolves around this backwater desert planet. It's it's the kind of the nexus point of everything, and we just keep coming back to it. And I feel like they should maybe lean off the nostalgia. But with Obi-Wan, obviously, necessity dictates that it has to take place at least partially in Tatooine. So that's fair enough. But you have this young Jedi played by, was it Benny Safdie, one of the Safdie brothers? And, he's this young Jedi, and we open the show with Order 66. I was not expecting that. That was pretty heavy. And at first I thought, like, why are we showing that? It's really like, it's just a horrible thing to revisit. But then I realized it's showing there are some kids who escaped. There are some kind of people out there, but we already kind of know this from Ahsoka and so on and so on. Not that I know much about any of that kind of stuff in the animated series, but so there's all that where I feel like it kind of it steps a little bit too much on what I feel like the story was in the beginning, but at the same time I think it is a galaxy, and there's trillions of people out there. Of course there's going to be Force sensitives, of course there's going to be evil ones and good ones, and to tell these stories they need to be around anyway, so that just is what it is. So I feel like that was just the introduction, and I've almost done the full review. But what else? Okay, so Leia. I'd heard rumblings. I wasn't sure, and I'd heard the story was going to be about rescuing Leia, and I thought, oh god, here we go. But I got to say, the actress who plays her, is it Vivian something Blair? She's great. I really like her a lot. I think she perfectly embodies the character of Leia. I will agree with the criticism that she doesn't look 10 years old. She acts kind of older than she looks, so it kind of fits. But she does. I think the actress was 7 when she filmed this, and the character's 10. So it's a bit, it's a bit of a leap there. But yeah, it is what it is. Who cares, right? and I try not to let those little things bother me. But the performance is there. Like she's really fun, and people have said she's annoying. Like I don't know. I guess I see it, but I really like her in the show, and to see her interact with Obi-Wan is like really tender area for me. It's like I don't want them to get too close. And again, the internet is rife right now with like people pointing to like articles and like the full dialogue of Star Wars, like the script of A New Hope, and like saying, look, it fits within the context of the established canon that she calls him General Kenobi in the message, but she's just being formal for the sake of this plea or whatever. But yeah, but I like how they're dancing around it, where he's calling himself Ben, he's distancing himself from Obi-Wan. Even when someone knows him as Obi-Wan Kenobi, he's like, it's just Ben. He doesn't tell her, at least not yet. He hasn't told her that he's Obi-Wan Kenobi. And oh my god, like the third episode, which was like, that's when things really kick into high gear. But I'll leave it. I'll talk about episode 3 towards the end of the video, but there's no way I'll forget talking about that moment. But I like the interactions between Obi-Wan and Leia. Did I need to see him running around the galaxy, kind of, saving her and stuff? I don't know, and I'm still on the fence about it a little bit. And getting to see Alderaan like properly was really cool. I really enjoyed that stuff. There always seems, in every Star Wars show now, there has to be this one moment that people pick up on and kind of like take out of context and say, look how bad this is. Admittedly, when you look at it, it's a bit weird when Leia's running through the woods and the gang's chasing her, and she kind of runs underneath this branch, and the person just runs into the branch and goes, oh, like, oh no, a branch, what am I going to do? And it's really bad. It is what it is. These things kind of, I don't want to say they slip through, but like it just was really unconvincing. But then, hey, you just think back to the stormtrooper bonking his head on the door in Star Wars. These things aren't perfect, and I think that's another thing that I'm like aware of, because I try to remember this a lot, and that's the original films are way too overblown and overrated. Are they great? Yes. Are they some of the best science fiction fantasy films ever made? Absolutely. But they're not perfect, and there are all the same little imperfections in those films as you see in these shows, and I think people just, I feel like they need to rewatch those original movies. Even Mark Hamill, like, he was like hadn't seen these films in like decades, and was saying, well, I feel like my character Luke would never give up because he's so optimistic and hopeful. And it's like, he wasn't really. Luke was a bit of a stick in the mud and quite pessimistic actually at times. So I feel like even people who are in the movies as the main characters have not seen these films for a long time, and just putting them up on this pedestal that's way too high, that it kind of reflects negatively on everything else that comes after it. So I never expect perfection from Star Wars. So there's little things like a person running into a branch not convincingly. It is what it is. It's fine. The story is what I'm interested in, and the story here is actually really good, because you're following Obi-Wan on this personal journey and this discovery that Anakin is still alive. And this is another thing I get a little bit tripped up on. I'm like, surely he lives in Tatooine. He goes into town. He has a job. And you're telling me no one has mentioned Darth Vader? Like, he's this, legendary figure. And I actually tweeted this to Pablo Hidalgo, who works at Lucasfilm, and he kind of is almost the keeper of the keys of like canon and like, keeping everything in order in terms of that stuff. He's written a lot of the books and stuff, the visual companions for the movies, and has been harassed many times by fans. But I like kind of just seeing what he has to say. And he made a good point that, like, if you look at Star Wars, it isn't really made explicit that Vader's this like notorious legend or anything like that. Certainly he's imposing, in kind of the moments that you see him in, but that boardroom scene in Star Wars, he's kind of a bit underestimated by even the Imperial officers. So, again, that maybe that's the fan perception in us and me, admittedly, where it's like, I feel like Vader's like, I mean, he's the most iconic villain in film history, right? I think that's pretty much sewn up. And so we look at him through the context of that, but in the reality of it, maybe he isn't quite as notorious, and is still, under the shadows of Palpatine a little bit. I don't know, but so I thought, okay, it's permissible that Obi-Wan never heard about Vader, I guess, and he is kind of quite isolated as well. He kind of lives off in this cave on his own. But I do feel like it feels like he's been there a few years, not 10 years, because he's so wrapped up in it. But I guess that makes it more tragic that it's been a decade and he still hasn't really been able to let it go. And when, a Bail Organa, and it's great to see Jimmy Smits coming back as that character. And I really liked his scene where he's telling Leia about what he was it his dreams or whatever of that thing. I can't remember the full context, but I liked that scene he had with Leia on the balcony. That was really nice. And it was nice to see him kind of get to do a scene with Leia, because he's kind of danced around it with Revenge of the Sith, and you see him holding the baby briefly, and then in Rogue One he's like, I trust her with my life. Like, so you never get to see him actually have a scene with Leia. So I think that the actor probably was quite excited to do that, I would imagine, and it was a really good scene. But yeah, like they call on Obi-Wan and he's like, nah, I'm good. He's like, my job is to watch the boy. And you do feel that it's more than that. It's not just Obi-Wan saying, well, my duty is here. It's more like, he's scared, and he doesn't, he's I don't say he feels safe there, but like you look at what he's doing and it's like he pulls out his binoculars and Luke's there kind of happy as Larry. What is Obi-Wan really doing there? I mean, he is there for a reason, but it seems like he's never really had to do much. And so I feel like he's probably a bit kind of, glad to be out of all that stuff in a way. And considering that the last time he was out there doing that kind of thing, it was the most traumatic event of his life, potentially, with Anakin and kind of killing his brother, You can see why he's reticent or scared or fearful or apprehensive or anxious about going out and doing anything again. But he's convinced to go. And that's where episode 2 picks up on this planet, which is very Blade Runner kind of inspired and kind of the cyberpunk kind of influence, which is nice. I like that look a lot. And then you get him kind of, rescuing Leia and going on about his business. And it was fun. And we have the character of Reva. And there's been a whole controversy about Reva and the third sister, I think, of one of the Inquisitors, who I believe are like characters from the animated shows, because people are like, oh, the Grand Inquisitor, and he doesn't look exactly the same as the cartoons. And we have Reva, played by Moses Ingram, who got a lot of hate. And I will talk about this a little briefly, because I want to commend them. It's almost, I don't want to say little, it's kind of a little too late. It's tricky because with Star Wars and the public brand presence on Twitter and on Facebook and the official word from the horse's mouth, they speak out sometimes, but they don't speak out in other times. And I feel like with the stuff with John Boyega, with Kelly Marie Tran, they weren't really saying much about it publicly, and I feel like the actors weren't really allowed to say much about it publicly either, and that was really shit. And then you have like Rian Johnson, director of The Last Jedi, calling these racist fucks man babies. And then this whole other sect of the fandom is like, he's calling us man babies for not liking his movie, and completely misreading and like willfully being ignorant about that, I think. Just latching onto anything they can to use against him. But now we have Moses Ingram saying on her Instagram page, like, this is the shit that I go through. Hundreds of messages calling me the N-word over Star Wars. And she said that she feels like, no one's told her, but she feels like the done thing is for her to not say anything about it. But she just could not do that because that's not how she's wired as a person, I guess. Then we have Star Wars, the official Twitter page, actually saying, like, we resist this kind of racism. A message from Ewan McGregor talking about, like, thank you for the fans because it's been the most watched Disney Plus premiere ever. But also it's been tainted a little bit by this stuff with Moses Ingram, and he talks about how much he loves working with her, how great she is, but also for him, the people who are sending her those vile racist messages that are no Star Wars fans as far as he's concerned. And again, people saying, well, where were they when this happened? Or where were they when Gina Carano got cancelled and stuff? And it's like, all right, this is a bit fucking different here. And again, we're getting the whole thing of like, oh, they're virtue signaling. It's SJW woke bullshit. Just because people are criticizing her character, they're saying we're racist. It's like, no, they're calling the racists racist. Let's get that clear. Okay? Like, just and it's shit because you speak out about this stuff. Oh, look at Emmy's virtue signaling. Like it's bollocks. It's absolute shit. But it's all part and parcel of Star Wars, unfortunately. But my thoughts on Reva, I'm really liking the character. I think she's cool. I think that there's a bit more to her than just this like villainous kind of, one note kind of. And I'm really intrigued to see how she knows that Vader is Anakin. And then again, people are like she shouldn't know this. Like like it's some fucking like holy secret or whatever. I mean, I guess it is, and it isn't at the same time. But like, people get so fucking precious about these things. But I'm intrigued to see where she goes moving forward because she's like obsessed with catching Obi-Wan and also with pleasing Vader. And so that's interesting because then we have like a different or an expanded view of the power dynamic and hierarchy in the Empire where we have like Vader, Grand Moff Tarkin, Emperor, and then now we have like the Inquisitors under here somewhere. So like we're getting more of a kind of a picture of where everyone slots in terms of the Empire and stuff. But yeah, so Reva, I'm liking her character. I'm intrigued to see more. Not much more than that really. Sung Kang, I believe, don't want to get that wrong, is like unrecognizable to me as one of the Inquisitors because I'm so used to him as Han in Fast and the Furious movies. I'm like, because I remembered that he was in it, and then I just suddenly realized like 2 episodes in, like, holy shit, it's him. Like he's really menacing. I really like his performance. Rupert Friend as the Grand Inquisitor, really not good. The first episode, I thought he was so. It was like hearing the same wrestling promo for the 100th time. It's just like the British accent and the slow menacing and like it just felt so bland and like read off a script. Like I don't know. I sorry to I'm sure he's a good actor, but like well maybe not. I don't know. From what I've seen, I didn't think that much, and I can't think of anything I've seen him in before, but. I really was not impressed with his performance in the first episode. The second episode, when he's really clashing more with Reva and kind of getting a bit testy with her, then some good shit was coming out, and I thought, that's really good. And then he gets stabbed in the stomach. But apparently there's this whole lore where like his species has 2 stomachs. And apparently he's in Rebels, and so he can't die. And so you have these characters who nothing really bad's going to happen to them. Speaking of that, it was a weird instance for me when, which character was it? It was I guess it was Reva, maybe? I can't remember if she was the one who did this, but basically they rounded up all ththese people in Mos Eisley, I guess is the town, and they want to find Obi-Wan, and they're like, someone knows something, and they're threatening them with like cutting off their limbs if they don't tell them the truth, and I'm like, wow, yeah, we won't see that. And then she just fucking cuts this woman's hand off. I think it's a woman. And you just see the hand like fall to the ground. I was like, holy. And I was just like jaw dropped and stuff. And then when I thought about it a few hours later, I was like, well, this is Star Wars. This has been happening from the beginning. It was a little bit more graphic than we've seen in previous movies where, even with Luke getting his hand cut off, you can see like the hole. And it's like a fake, rubber hand or whatever. But it just surprised me so much. I was like, wow, that was really graphic. And it is and it isn't. But we are seeing some fairly violent stuff in this show, and especially with the 3rd episode. Let's talk about the 3rd episode. That to me was like, okay, the show's really finding its feet now. Because at the beginning we have Vader. And we saw a glimpse of him at the end of episode 2, and it's like, okay, now we're seeing Hayden Christensen in kind of the full makeup and stuff without the mask. That's interesting. Episode 3, and this is something I've been worrying about from the day they announced this and the day that they announced that Hayden Christensen was coming in to play the role of Darth Vader. What are they going to do about the voice? They didn't announce anything about the voice, and I thought, you've got to get James Earl Jones. He's still around. I know he sounds older, but it's going to be better than having Hayden Christensen do it, or worse, doing the re-speecher stuff that they did with Luke Skywalker in the Book of Boba Fett, because that was just a kind of flat, emotionless performance for me, and it felt like what it was from a computer. We see Vader in episode 3 in his castle. I fucking love Vader's castle. It goes all the way back to the concept art from Ralph McQuarrie for The Empire Strikes Back and Vader's castle, which was never in the final film. And I believe the first iteration of it was this fortress on the ice planet. But obviously they kind of, and I think the design comes from those early sketches. But I love Vader's castle, and we see him there on this throne, which is really fucking awesome. And he's having a conversation with Reva, and it's James Earl Jones, and it was like spine tingling. It was like, oh my god, it's James fucking Earl Jones, and he sounds incredible. And I just thought, oh my god. And my first thought was, okay, they got him in to do the lines, and they've tweaked it to make him sound a bit younger, and it just fucking works so well. But now apparently someone has noticed that in the credits, the respeecher technology is credited. So it's highly possible that this James Earl Jones voice was also entirely synthesized and digitally generated and was not an actual performance, which is kind of heartbreaking in one sense. And the other sense, it sounded like him, and it sounded like a performance. Like there was genuine feeling coming out of those lines. If that was all from respeecher, I think we've got Darth Vader covered like forever. Assuming that they would obviously get permission from James Earl Jones to kind of use that voice, because that was incredible. I mean, either way, he sounded great. And there's some, just like seeing Obi-Wan face off with Darth Vader, and he's like, "What have you become?" And Vader's like, "I am what you made me." That's the good shit. Like that is the good shit. And I love that their fight was like in a fucking like a quarry, just the most uncinematic kind of like Star Wars duel you'll ever see. But it's just like the kind of tension and the kind of horror movie feeling of like Vader just appearing out of the fucking the dark shadows of this cement and dirt and gravel, and it was just like eerie in a way. It felt like a bit like a Friday the 13th movie. And so just hearing his voice again was just like, oh my god, it just adds so much. And it was unforgettable to me in Rogue One, in the cinema, watching that film for the first time and hearing James Earl Jones' voice, and it was just like a surreal experience. Because yeah, we can get Mark Hamill in and he looks appropriately 30 years older. Yeah, we can get Harrison Ford back and he looks appropriately 30 years older. Same with Carrie Fisher and all these other characters and stuff. But with Vader, you can get the suit where it looks pretty much identical, and then the voice is there, and it's like you just step back in time, and that character is there right in front of you. Similar to Yoda as well in The Last Jedi. I'm going into too much of a tangent here, but with Yoda in The Last Jedi, the puppet looks weird at the beginning. I don't know what the issue is there, but once we see him in close-up with the tree behind him on fire, it looks amazing, and the voice is there. And that transports you back to those original movies. And that's the same effect that I think I get with James Earl Jones voicing Darth Vader. And I'm so glad that, again, no offense to Hayden Christensen, and he probably could have done a good job with the voice. I'll leave that in for free. And people have even noticed that like Hayden Christensen's voice is a lot more gravelly now than it was, 15 years ago. He probably could pull off a fairly decent one, but maybe it's the fact that Vader's voice is kind of robotic and slightly off, and there's an effect over it that makes the respeecher stuff work. But regardless, whatever it is, he sounded great. Now, another thing about Episode 3 that really hit home for me was the scene with Obi-Wan and Leia on the back of that speeder transport, the speeder truck. And they're just having this conversation. There's this beautiful scene where she kind of says, "You're my father, aren't you?" And he's like, "No, I wish I was," And it's a very sad moment because he knew her mother. He practically delivered this girl, when she was born. And he talks about his family. He talks about how, he was taken away from his family when he was very young, because that's what happens with Jedi who are taken as younglings, and he only remembers flashes of things about his parents, his mother's shawl, his father's hands, and a baby. I think I had a brother. Like the writing is beautiful because it's not "I had a brother." I think I had a brother. There's so much more like hurt and bittersweet tragedy to that line than "I had a brother" as well. I think I had a brother. I'm not sure. It's just these feelings, and it calls back to Carrie's beautiful performance in Return of the Jedi when she talks about remembering the little shit that she does of her mother, which, that doesn't really fit in kind of the canon of the story now, because, unless you really think about Leia as like a 2-second-year-old baby just feeling through the Force an essence of her mother in that time. Well, I guess that's kind of where you kind of work it in, I suppose. But that scene where he's talking to her about his maybe having a brother and stuff, and her wondering if he was her father, and clearly it's weighing on her. And they set that up in the first episode with like the kind of actually the rich kids, but like the other royal kind of children who kind of the one in particular who's kind of taking the piss out of her because she's not a real Organa. So that's something that's part of her story here, is that she knows that she's not related to her parents by blood, and she thinks that maybe this mysterious Ben character is her actual father, and it's kind of really sad when you almost feel like she's hoping that's the case in a way, and I really want to see more of them together. I'm actually really enjoying that dynamic, even if it does rub up a little bit too close to the fact that in Star Wars they don't really recognize each other, or kind of it's one of those things where I feel like they shouldn't get too close, but I want to see them get close, and that's the kind of quandary I have, where I want to see more of this stuff. But the more that it goes on, and the better it gets story-wise, the more it conflicts a little bit with Star Wars. But that's just one of those things that I'll have to let go of, I suppose. And I can't wait to see where it goes from here. I'm really enjoying it. And again, little tiny, and it sounds like a really whiny review. Hopefully not as whiny as Luke was in the first movie, but when Vader shows up and it's like snapping necks and shit, that's like, ooh. I do feel like they fetishize Vader a bit in the Lucasfilm era. Undeniably, the hallway scene is a powerful scene. I don't think it's cool. I think it's powerful, and it's overwhelming, and it's full of horror. And people are like, oh, it's so fucking cool. I don't know. It's kind of, I guess it's a slasher movie kind of riff, basically. But for me, like, Vader is like, choking the guy and then just throwing him into the wall. It's not too graphic or explicit, and that works better for me, I think. So seeing him just pick people up and snap their necks, I mean, it's kind of cool, I guess, but I don't know. But like, he's there in that street, and his daughter is literally like on the other side of that door, and I feel like you're telling me that Anakin, Vader, whatever you want to call him, couldn't sense that his child, Padme's daughter, is right there, But then you can say the same for the opening scene of Star Wars when they have that confrontation right away. So, it's just one of those things where, again, obviously at the beginning they didn't know that Leia was his daughter, and so I guess the canon reason is that he just didn't figure it out, didn't feel it, didn't sense it, and maybe because he's more machine now than man, that is your reasoning. And then finally, when Obi-Wan's walking through the streets with Leia in episode 2, and she's being very sassy and stuff, and he's like, "How old are you again?" No, he didn't say again. He just says, "How old are you?" And she's like, 10. He's like, "Well, you don't seem like 10." And it's like, dude, she's 10. Again, you were there when she was born. You practically delivered her. But someone pointed out, he's just kind of like being sassy back with her. He knows that she's 10, but he's just kind of, he can't let her know that. So fair enough. I can see that one once someone explained that to me. And that's something I feel like we should do more of. It's just like, when we're arguing these things, debating these things, and someone says something that makes sense, you just go, yeah, actually that makes sense. Because I've done it, and I'm sure most of us have done it, where someone talks sense, but we're stuck on it, and we're like, no, doesn't work, So I'm trying to be better with that, and with that, I will say, it does fit that he's just kind of, he's bantering with her and not trying to let on that he knows too much, I suppose. That's pretty much it. We have the Obi-Wan theme that John Williams composed, and I'm not going to go into the whole celebration thing. I just think it was bullshit that they didn't show hardly any of that stuff, including the John Williams performing with a live orchestra the new Obi-Wan Kenobi theme. They say in the credits, like, John Williams, the Obi-Wan theme is by John Williams, but like there's someone credited as adapting the Obi-Wan Kenobi theme. So I don't know if like anything even in the episodes is actually like physically conducted by John Williams, but it's a really interesting, mournful piece that I need to hear more of, but it's growing on me because they're using it quite a lot throughout the episodes, and obviously the end credits and stuff. So Yeah, that was another thing. The cameo from Temuera Morrison as one of the clone troopers was fantastic. You know, and someone was saying on Twitter, like, Temuera Morrison should be the Stan Lee of the Star Wars universe moving forward, and I'm fully behind that because you could do a lot with that. But it was a nice like throwaway thing. It wasn't lingered on too much, and I liked it. That was a really good little cameo that made sense and had some history for Obi-Wan too. When he sees this clone trooper, you know, this is one of the many people he fought alongside for many years. Anyway, there's probably more. I'll leave it there. It's been a lengthy one, and this is just the first 3 episodes. I think I'll leave it until the end before I come back with my final thoughts, but that's been my general feeling. Some of the CGI is a bit ropey. Some of the, even just like Obi-Wan sitting on the ledge of his cave, you can kind of just feel the body not connecting with the background a bit. And it's in stark contrast to Stranger Things season 4, which to me just looks phenomenal. And some of this stuff where they're in the upside down and it's just like everything's fake and they're just running around on a green screen, but it looks seamless. And I just think that's what happens when you have like a lot more money per episode and a lot more time to put it together, because it's been a fairly quick turnaround from filming this show to releasing it. I think maybe like a year and a half or something like that, maybe less. From, I think they started filming about a year ago, so maybe not, I don't know. But you can feel at times that certain things aren't as crisp as maybe the main movies, but again, you kind of just go along with it. And I love the Lola droid. Like, there's some cool bits of design and like just minor characters that I'm liking, and the fuller Star Wars universe is stuff that I'm always like, I like that stuff, and they've shown some really good parts of that. And I'm, you know, as much as I'm not too hot on Kenobi traveling around the galaxy, it is fun just to see different places and stuff, and it is kind of an adventure. And hey, who's to say that he didn't go on an adventure, you know? But it's not really an adventure. It's a trip through hell, as he's realizing. And that's another thing, like seeing his realization that Anakin's still around, and like there's Vader, you know. It's really interesting stuff psychologically. And of course the scene when, how do I forget, when he burns Obi-Wan. Like, I'm gonna do the same thing you did to me, motherfucker. Like, that's a pretty intense sequence, and the way he lifts him up with one hand, and then like puts the saber down and lights the ground on fire. That was a pretty fucking incredible visual. And you know, predictably, the people who get really like fan wanky about Vader and Vader killing people and stuff were like, "Oh my god, it's the coolest thing ever." You know, I'm not quite in that camp, but it was very visually impactful. I like that. So I will leave it there mercifully. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.